Welcome to the Spotlight Podcast. We are filming from our small studio in Nottingham, UK. Today with us, my colleague, Harry Lewis, MA Politics and a student athlete. Harry, thanks for joining us.
No worries.
Can you please tell me at the very beginning a little bit about your educational background?
So basically from Nottingham and like what you'd say as a Nottinghamshire state school. So a very kind of humble and like normal upbringing, worked hard, kind of wanted to see where athletics and then like also just like a general education would take me. Didn't really excel at anything in particular until secondary school, where I found like I enjoyed history and athletics was just something that kind of came along through hard work. And actually there's a lot of sports where you have to be technically gifted, and being technically gifted can help you, but hard work was really the thing that started to flow. And I think the best thing for me when I started to grow was I realized, okay, maybe I'm not going to be a footballer, or maybe I'm not going to be a cricketer or something that like is quite an English sport, but the things where I can really work hard and like make a stamp on. And then I realized that something like athletics, that mindset can be put into education. And then my A-levels became, which is like higher education, the first level of England, started to become so much easier. And then I turned around to myself and then realized I can do it. Like even at university level, I could do it. So yeah, it was trial by ordeal, like learning to make mistakes and then get better at them.
Can you try to get back in time and get in your head and walk us through this decision-making process? As you mentioned, football is huge in the UK. 3.5 million kids are playing at the moment. Less than 1% of them make it to the pros.
Yeah.
And you feel you want to be there and play with your buddies, but then you make a pivot and shift towards the athletics, which is kind of individual sport, the high jump.
Yeah.
Take us through.
So going really far back, I didn't even initially I didn't even really want to be a footballer, but it's one of those ones where somehow in the UK it finds you and it kind of like grips you. And I remember specifically about 2010, I'd have been 8 years old watching the World Cup and thinking, I can do that. Like, if they can do it, why can't I? And
exactly.
You're in the garden, you're running around. I didn't have a specific football team. Nottingham's huge for football, but I support Liverpool, which obviously is even bigger kind of football establishment in the UK. For me, yeah, growing up, I actually did karate. That was the very first thing I did, and it's because my dad did it. And the switch from karate to high jump is a lot easier to kind of establish in the head than a switch from football to high jump. But I did karate throughout playing football as a youngster, and I was very good at football initially. I'm naturally quite quick, naturally quite well balanced, and I had an idea of how to play football from like 7, 8. Like most kids will probably develop that when they're like maybe 13, 14, 15. Like, how do you play football? A lot of kids just kick a ball around and chase a ball, and that's kind of like grassroots football in the UK. I also was a ref, so even at like 14, 15, I got to kind of basically see the game from the other side. And I think I got to about 16 and thought, okay, I haven't made the academy yet, probably not going to make an academy now. And interestingly, if I'd have started doing the work that I'm doing now for athletics back then just the physicality level would have been so much easier. Mm. And I think to myself, maybe if I had, it's always about mentors and kind of doors opening, and that just was never going to happen in football, because it just doesn't, unless someone sees you early enough and they think, okay, this is the next Raheem Sterling, Marcus Rashford, Phil Foden.
In hindsight, would you change the path, even pivot it a little bit if you can, for example?
I wouldn't change the path. If I could change how well funded athletics is, so if I could convert like my athletics kind of stature into the football world,
exactly,
then of course, yeah, because I mean, if you're top 10 in your country in football, you make the team. if you're top 10 in the UK, no one hears of you. Do you know what I mean? You have to fight for that.
Okay, walk us through the BA history at the NTU. How this happened?
So initially, I was wanting to go to America. That was going to be a scholarship to San Jose, potentially in California, was probably the one that I was looking at the most. And then COVID came around, which kind of derailed my application to America because of visas. It meant that I'd have been 6 months to a year behind kind of where I needed to be. And that process really just daunted me in the sense of like, hey, I'm going to be out of education for how long? I don't know, because COVID was just a brand new thing. And then they're already telling me that it could be 6 months or a year later to when you thought you were going to join university. And I was ready to move. But living in Nottingham, kind of got I didn't initially actually get the qualifications I needed to go to university. The government gave us what we were called COVID grades, or just like a guess. And they used algorithms that didn't really kind of fit into, how do I explain it? Like, there's so many students who were failed by that system because they were intellectually brilliant, but didn't like sitting, or couldn't be asked to sit mock exams like 6 months to 10 months before. So some of my GCSE and some of my A-level grades, some of like the mock exams that we do, went towards my future grades. So you're telling me that 15-year-old Harry was the person being marked by the government through an algorithm for like 17, nearly 18-year-old Harry who would have been sitting his A-levels. And I can tell you, first of all, that person was a lot more mature. He knew what he wanted to do, and he'd had 2 or 3 years of hard work and success in athletics, which had started to seep into all aspects of his life. And so originally I woke up on results day, didn't have any of my English offers, knew America was not happening, and I jokingly said to my mum, I'm going to become a bricklayer, you know, I need to go do something. At least I'll be able to do that, you know, make some money. I didn't, obviously. On results day, I opened my paper and it said C, D, E. I'm thinking, okay, my predicted grades were A, B, C at like a minimum. And I was expecting at least myself to get close or maybe hit it. Maybe one grade below. I think Uni of Birmingham at the time really liked me for my athletics. And I'd had a meeting with them and they dropped a few grades in a few places. And there was a chance that... Kind of meet you halfway? Yeah, or just... If you just slightly miss what we're expecting, there's a door. But I was nowhere near. Like catastrophically, I came home and thought, CDE is like less than 80 UCAS points, which in the UK, UCAS is kind of, yeah, okay. And I'm thinking, where do I go? And actually, Nottingham Trent University, before any of my ramifications or any of the changes to those initial grades were made, were there. They were like, okay, we see the bigger picture. We understand that this is a wide-scale thing. I mean, I think they said something like 56% of Nottinghamshire school students were downgraded by 2 or more A-level slots. Man. But mine was across the board. And I go to my college or school. It's the same thing. It's called George Spencer Academy. It's your atypical school in the sense of, in that area, a lot of schools kind of aren't maybe great at getting people to the next stage. They just get them through. Where this school is very good at getting, first of all, get your GCSEs. And it's all about get 10 GCSEs, you can do whatever you want. And then it's the A-level system that they have at their sixth form is, we'll get you 3 A-levels, you'll go to university. And then kind of like, we got you out the door both ways in the best possible place. So I was in a good school for the area, good sixth form, but we got basically algorithms through a postcode system where, okay, so typically a student in this postcode is not going to perform to the highest standard. So it's kind of like, hang on, they used some of my younger grades, some of my peer pupils' younger grades, and then people from other schools who we always would know potentially weren't getting the same level of education as we were, because just luckily this was the school that we went to, and it did better in just across the board. And there was obviously a kickback across the country, and 2-3 weeks later, I'm on holiday. My school actually kind of shot me in the foot here. They sent me a physical hard copy letter, not a text, not an email, not a school email, not to my mum, you know, any way they could have contacted me legitimately. I was on holiday in England, because obviously COVID, so I couldn't go abroad, but I came home from school. Oh, Harry, here are your correct A-levels. And it was the equivalent of an A, a B, and a C. And I say equivalent of an A. I did Cambridge Technicals, which is it's like a BTEC, but it's kind of the Cambridge University are the moderators for it. And that was in computer science. And it was like, damn, that was everything I needed to go to Birmingham. And I've already gone through a clearing process where Birmingham said, absolutely not with those grades. So they'd already kind of put me off a little bit, like, oh, that's how quick that door can shut. And I'd already signed for NTU, and everything was moving in that correct direction. And I was like, okay, I felt like I was highly overestimated, highly underestimated. Yeah. And then I kind of came into my history BA with better A-levels than I would have even needed. So not that coming to NTU felt like a step back, but it felt very much like a sideways step. And that's in the nicest possible way. I love NTU. They've done everything for me, and they continue to do so much for me now as a scholar. It just took a while for me to realize that actually you got to find the institution that wants you. And then when you kind of make a name for yourself and they start realizing you're valuable, they really do. And actually, I was wanting to go to San Jose, America. That would have been California. You can imagine sunshine, everything. Didn't happen. Birmingham, Loughborough with my 2 options for university. Birmingham through grades, Loughborough through... Loughborough's got a stigma about just in general. It's kind of like the best go there. But I often feel like it also has like a popularity contest consistently. And I just didn't want to be a part of that. So actually, it was one of those ones where I found my feet at Trent, got into the course, and started to enjoy it. But I didn't feel we still had the whole COVID ramifications of 2020, 2021. Am I really at university? I'm just I wasn't at home. I was just in my uni accommodation, just on my laptop, and couldn't go out, couldn't do anything, and couldn't even train. So there was like a triple ramification there of like, can't do the 3 things that I want to do. I don't really feel like I'm at university. Don't feel like I'm really enjoying life or a job. Don't feel like I'm even making progress in athletics. So it was a stagnation for a year. And then a couple of other things that we'll get into happened end of my first year, but I managed to squeeze through and make it out of first year alive. It's what it felt like. Into my second and third year, and kind of just built upon bigger setbacks. And I realized, okay, COVID was potentially a big setback for everyone, but when you realize how far away from the target you can go, you then realize that, okay, the journey's big, but if I've done it once, I can always get back to where kind of I felt I should have been. And even now into I say 2023, nearly 2024, 2 months away kind of thing, there's a lot of potential that I feel like I grew into. I always felt like I had potential for stuff, but where do I put my finger on stuff? It's just, I knew I was potential, but I just didn't know where to put it. And I think maybe being an adult and having to be an adult in those first 2 years where COVID was a thing really did make it hard for me to establish myself anywhere. And something that kind of sticks out for me was at the end of first year, I had really, really poor health, to the point where I was in the Queen's Medical Centre, which is our big like local hospital, like the Midland Trauma Centre. My tonsils were inflamed, but I knew it was something more than that because I'd had tonsillitis before, and this was wrong. Antibiotics weren't helping me. Blood tests were not coming back correct, and questions were now being asked. And it was one of those ones where we had no idea for 7 days what was happening. And then a secondary test of one of the tests that had failed previously came back positive. I got glandular fever, which had gone septic through the kind of damage that it had done to my tonsils. And that level of setback completely destroyed athletics for about 2 years, because you get glandular fever, you get chronic fatigue syndrome, and then all of a sudden you're trying to train like an elite athlete, and you've got like the mindset and physical body of someone who's gone through it. And that setback really allowed me to focus on my university, because as I was still trying to be a professional athlete, it kind of created a lot of heartache in the sense of, I'm not where I'm supposed to be. Let's channel all that positive energy that I normally come with, and let's get my degree. That's what I came to university for. And then through trialing and effort and everything, in third year, I got my degree, so passed as a BA honours student in history, and won a Bucks medal, which is, we call it British University Championships. Bucks is its hyphenation. That really kind of opened the door for, okay, it made a master's a hell of a lot cheaper, because the university wanted to give me X, Y, and Z to allow me to stay here, because I could have gone anywhere really at that point. I'm, free hire, free agent, and I realised that actually NTU may be not my first choice as a BA student, but as an MA student, 100% it was, because they could just offer me everything. They were like, we'll do this, we'll do this, we'll do this, we'll do this. And I'm like, okay, let's bring it on. And actually that was kind of the understanding of, you find your place, or sometimes your place finds you.
While I was listening, I'm thinking how many of us at a certain point in our lives feel like prisoners of circumstances. And then from that perspective, it's very challenging to think what the comeback would look like. Can you tell me from this perspective how you look at these things?
There was definitely times in COVID, and that's probably one of the biggest examples we'll ever have in our lifetime, where for no reason that you chose or wanted to, there were so many things that were derailed, and so many people's lives were changed in the sense of like, things will never be the same. And yeah, there was moments especially in that first time period for me, where I questioned everything. Do I want to do this? Like, is it, because at first we didn't know how long it was going to be. Do you know what I mean? There was serious, considerable doubt that things could not be like correct for 10 years or 15 years, because especially the way that England handled our rollout, it was tricky. And
understatement.
Yeah. I think tricky is a good word, because it was tricky for them, of course, yeah, but they made it trickier than it should have been. They kind of, they quagmire. The more you make, the more... We're trying to get out of this, but it was just digging a hole in a wet puddle. You know what I mean? It was just like collapsing in on each other. And that idea of being a prisoner, yeah, I mean, I think everybody who was 18, 17, 16 felt like, right, this is what retirement feels like. I'm having a trial, what do? I wake up. What do I do today? There was nothing to do. So it was just kind of like, for me, it was keep myself fit and healthy and focus on learning, just like, can I learn stuff on my own? So I got really into watches and just like picked up little hobbies just to try and, it felt like passing the time. And you think, this is crazy, this is my life and I'm passing time. But I actually do look back on that COVID summer with fond memories, because a lot of fun times with my friends in the sense of online spaces. So, I mean, what would we have done without like the online space? Like, it would have been awful. Like, I genuinely think the amount of hours that I spent either chatting to my friends or physically playing on like the Xbox or stuff like that. And there are moments where you kind of like can alleviate the situation and the feelings, but deep down inside, we all knew what we really wanted to be doing. Like, I was 18, I'd passed my A-levels. I mean, it came round to it eventually that I did pass them well, even though it didn't feel like it, and I kind of felt like that was stolen from me as well. The thought of being a prisoner does crush your mind in those times, because it's almost like, I've done nothing wrong here, but I guess I have to lock myself away from the existence that you imagined. And that's that mindset that it took a long time for me to come to terms. Truly, we will get past it, and I can, and it almost, I had to go through a second phase of this when I had my illness. And glandular fever, I don't know if you fully know, but it swells internal organs in the central nervous system. So something like high jump is basically impossible. 10 times your body weight through the floor at takeoff. No, you're going to pop something. You will bleed out. I got told that your spleen is probably the most likely to go first, and impact sport is a no-no. Well, impact at takeoff and landing. So there was a second level there of kind of like, this isn't something that I wanted or ever envisaged my life happening, but it's happening. How do I adapt and how do I overcome it? And actually, I spoke to so many people and nobody quite gets your perspective, but it is the right thing to do, because speaking is the only way that you can almost like expel that energy of like, where do I go from here? What can I do? And the quickest way you can overcome those is almost the longest way. And it's that time, and it's that realization, and it's that understanding that you're not there now, but you can be. And for me, the big thing was, okay, I'm not going to kill myself for 6 months of, okay, I feel shit, or I'm not myself, but in 6 years, where can I be? And I can apply that to athletics. I can apply that to kind of a job or like financial goals or aspirations, or you can apply that to your family. Like, okay, someone could be having 6 months of hell with their family, their wife, but in 6 years it might be completely different. You know, that person who you're falling out with might not be around, or might not be alive, or there could be, you know, new family members, or so much joy to come from that. And it was that kind of idea of 6 months of hell or 6 years of a plan, where you take the pressure off these 6 months. You just work out what you got to do and do it. And I spoke to a sports psychologist who kind of helped me really kind of like tape. And I say tape because that's quite an interesting like thought process in my head. Tape down the issues, because they're not really issues, and tape is, I mean, it's removable, isn't it? It's not, you're not trying to nail something in, or there's nothing aggressive about that. It's kind of like, okay, just tape away the issue, focus on what fixes that. And then when you take the tape away, nothing ever happened. It's kind of like smooth and it's gone. And
you're done with it.
Yeah, and tape is discardable, and we also use tape in high jump, so it was a really good metaphor for us. It's what we mark our run-up out with. It was that kind of, at the end of every session, you take your tape away, you're fresh and you're new after that, or like whatever comes beyond that session is something you don't know what's going to happen next. You take the tape away. That was something that was in my mind, and it was almost like every session it felt like all the tape, and the yellow tape is probably a good way of describing it. You were pulling away like bit by bit by bit by bit. And then 6 months down the line, I was like, okay, I'm not even thinking about that kind of cloud of thoughts or worries, and it was almost like I had like a childlike mindset of kind of like, you don't see a child thinking about playing, they just play. Exactly. And
comes natural.
Yeah, and it's finding what comes natural, and that's where it really, I think that's the way to get away from, leading back to your question, being like encamped or in your own mind, or if that's physically like a COVID lockdown or physically like an illness. We will all go through something like that in our lifetime, and almost maybe the way that you kind of beat that is over a long time you start to heal, but almost act like a child, in the sense of like, it's that fearlessness that has to come from within.
Exactly.
And yeah, that's probably the thing that I learned the most actually in universities. Like, you have your own superpowers, just find them.
Why history?
History is interesting for many reasons, and I think to go slightly before even picking it as a BA, I just was naturally very good at it. I mean, I think a lot of the things that I kind of did as a younger kid would have been less kind of based around, potentially my mum and my dad, without realizing, did things with me as a kid that educated me beyond kind of like natural kind of limitations, in the sense of, and when I say natural limitations, I mean what is expected for kids. I would have gone to less fast food restaurants, but I would have gone to more museums and national trusts and experienced like nature to almost like the nth degree, in the sense of like, if I wasn't going on a walk every weekend, it was wrong. Kind of like, when are we going on the walk this weekend kind of thing. And that would have been, I mean, where I'm from, like in Nottingham, is actually, luckily, we've got an Attenborough Nature Reserve, which is, it's a World Heritage Site. It's a lovely place, and that would be kind of like the minimum expectation. But a couple of hours drive and to go somewhere, and then you realise history is everywhere in those kind of places, especially museums, but the National Trust is thick with history. And I think one of the first bedtime stories that I can remember being like ever read would have been, it's a big grey book, and it's just a thick history book, and it starts right back with Homer and the Babylonians, and it kind of trickles its way through history in such a nice way, and talks about China and religion, and comes through to the Romans and the classics. And this is one of my first bedtime stories, and it was just because I think at the time my dad would have been reading it, and he thought, this is probably something that's really good. And the amount of times I would have been falling asleep and imagining what I thought this kind of like, this book of history was about. And for me, it was stories, but very true, obviously real stories. And I had a grasp of that, maybe a 4 or 5 year old. I had a grasp that this all happened, but I didn't quite know all the answers. And it's probably that intrigue level that made me realize, I got to do this. I got to search this up. And I started playing games about history. So like literally wanting to do, I mean, like every boy, they go, okay, I want to be a soldier. But I didn't want to be the soldier with the AK-47. I wanted to be the soldier who was wearing the gladiator armor. You know, I wanted to have the Roman sword. I wanted to have kind of the Praetorian armor. And that kind of level of excitement kind of came through. I don't know, it just felt very different growing up as a kid, in the sense of like, I'd speak to a lot of my friends and they'd be like, did you watch WWE at the weekend? I'd be like, no. No. Did you watch the football? I didn't watch football, like I said, until I was like, I watched it at the World Cup, but didn't really watch it until I was like 9, 10. So there was like a long kind of period of time where my weekends consisted of reading, trying to build things, and playing games like kids would, but history related. Even computer games that I would play on the computer, like history related, like some of the Total War sagas and stuff like that. Like, when I think back at it, it's odd for a child to do that. Like, I was playing kind of games that were like more advanced but less gory, so that's why I kind of felt like, I don't know, it's a very weird one where I feel like maybe I found a niche very young that I liked history, and not many people did. And I just kind of ran with that, and it's led all the way through. I mean, I was just very good at school. Like,
and obviously, humans, we crave on stories, Harry, and this is something that distinguishes us from the other living beings or creatures on this planet Earth. It's for me completely natural that you know, got hooked by these stories, and they kept you until now. I guess I still do, because I had a history lecturer last year, and he's called Gianluca. He's Italian, and he used to say, historians are like orcs. They crave blood. And it's like, you will find a historian, but I think in general that's quite true, in the sense of humans will search and they crave like a story or something they can either be shocked about, or something that they can confide in, or something that they can almost like realize something about their own life in. Yeah, relate.
And maybe history for me was, there was some things I related to it, and some things where you think about history is always written about the victor, and there are occasions where there is non-victorious historians, I guess, but maybe there's something quite glorious about like history in the past, and
the victor belongs the spoils.
Especially when I think probably my favorite history is classical history, and it's the one I really haven't actually ever studied properly. And I mean, I would have done classical history if I had gone to Birmingham at university, because I wanted to my whole degree would have been ancient history, and it would have been pretty much Babylon, even the Sumerians, right through to just before the classics. So, but I did modern history at NTU, and kind of took away that kind of bias, and I went and like learned other parts of history, and I enjoyed it nonetheless. And I realized very soon into that history degree that I enjoy learning history. Like my A-level history was Russian history. My GCSE history was Elizabethan England. Do you know what I mean? Lots of different time perspectives. I still enjoyed them nonetheless. Do you know what I mean? So I think history is one of those ones where if you give it time, it gives you time. And that's one of those ones where I can count on many, many fingers how many times that someone will say something and I've gotten into a conversation because there is something that I know history-wise. It comes into conversations and I'll be like, well, I know why that is. Like someone was talking about chronological order and they were trying to, where does that come from? They were literally mentioning the word, where does chronological order come from?
And you start digging through your brain.
And straight away I was on it. I was like, well, the god of time, or the titan of time, Kronos, comes from Greece. Gave them that little bit of information. Their eyes were like, wow, I didn't know that. And it's like, that just helped me just almost like elevate that relationship with whatever that person was at the time. And it was like a spark. And they were like, it completely intrigued, but I had their attention. And attention is always probably one of the most important things.
Most important.
Because if you can hold attention. And
you are in the game.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe I use history to my own advantage in considerable parts of my life where probably you'd never think you'd ever use it. But there's so many people with an interest for history. They just don't know it. My girlfriend goes to me all the time, history, no, it's so boring. But then I'll start talking about it or reading something and she'll be like...
She all ears.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you really believe that if we know history, it helps us not to repeat mistakes?
Yeah, okay, so that is an interesting question because I think mistakes are made when someone's trying hard or too hard. Because
Bukowski said, "Don't try."
So one of my school mottos was, "If you're not making mistakes, you're not trying." But there is a weird balance, and I understand this even in my sport. Sometimes you've got to go at it with that fuck it mentality. And that mentality for me sometimes is as light as a bird or whatever. And it's that moment of just elation. And it's freedom. And that's when you're at your raw best. But sometimes to be at your raw best, there needs to be almost like a pre-done catalogue of hard work. And I think that's where actually some people get it wrong, that if it's a test, an exam, an event, a sport, even like a podcast today, you can prep for it and you'll be good. But in the moment, it's fluidity. And that's that. In sport, we call it kind of, we call it that space where you're in flow state. And flow state is very hard to come by when you're trying hard. So coming back to the history question, if people are trying too hard, then they make mistakes considerably more than people who aren't trying at all. I think people who aren't trying at all, when they make mistakes, it's expected. And I think the people who are trying too hard, they find it unexpected. So maybe that's that kind of symbiosis, in the sense of like, you think you're trying hard, and then when you make mistakes, it hurts more. If you know you're not trying hard and you make mistakes, it's like, well, I wasn't trying hard. Understanding history is one of those ones where, yes, I can understand through many horrible things that happen in history, not to repeat them. But how many people are ever in the situation where they have the chance to repeat some of the stuff that happens in history? And maybe if you look at something so small spectrum as your own life, yes, you can learn from your mistakes. And yes, it doesn't have to be something that you did was like an innate reaction. You might have learned something and you can unlearn that. But long-term history, I think humans are a species with amnesia, in that sense of we can just say something one day and be like, okay, that's awful. In the sense of like, we are so defiant of for certain things, and we're like, we're never going to do that again. It doesn't matter. As soon as that generation has passed, the new generation comes through. They have no recollection of that predisposed. Like, it's like me and you. We're not around in World War II. We know about it, and we probably both have pride or the feeling of what happened to our country during that war, or even longer history, I guess, for Britain and Europe. It's a lot of history. But for me, it's like I don't physically actually know how to feel about World War II. I know what I'm told. And then that's that feeling of, how are my grandkids even going to know about that? Because I'm going to be telling them a story where my grandma and granddad can give me live recollection of what it was like. So when I give my grandkids that, I'm going to be giving a story about live recollection. And then all of a sudden, so the study of history it really can help to understand people's plight or issues or success. At a personal level, that's where you really, I think, struggle with like almost like a primary understanding or a secondary understanding. And that's almost why sometimes I think it's more important to get right your own life so that history almost has you in the right light. So almost like get now right, and then history will do the work for you. Don't get now wrong, because you'll be forgotten or you'll be talked about in the wrong light. So that's kind of my perspective in history. And actually, like, I love what history does for people, because how many people in history are just middlemen? There's hardly any. Oh, it was just a guy. You got heroes and you got villains. And somewhere along that line, you're there. And that's kind of actually why I think history is enticing, because you've either got a villain story, like we see in the movies, or you've got a hero story.
Small digression. Take us through the high jump, especially this, I would say run through. Maybe I'm not too technical with it, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, so a high jump run up is so specific. People will just go, well, you just run and jump over a bar backwards. You're aiming to jump over a 1 centimeter thick piece of plastic, 2+ meters up in the air. Do you know, it's one of those ones where, how many times in your life do you ever think, I'm going to jump over something backwards into just a pit, like a foam pit? It's one of those things for me where I do it and I know how to do it. But then to break that down and explain it, it's almost like, it feels like you say words and people are going to go, still don't understand how to do it. So for me, the true breakdown is, if you have a good understanding of physics, it's just purely speed, power, and that moment of first force. So for me, moment of a force equals force times distance. So if I can impact the floor, moving nice and quickly at a strong position, then I'll jump high. But then there's a complete magic to high jump, where it's the only kind of body position that a human can throw themselves over a bar and their center of gravity actually goes below the bar. And it's that kind of centripetal, where you almost throw yourself around a wheel. And it's that moment of kind of, you reach your moment of peak, you then start to go back, and then I can't explain it. And it's something that, when you get it right, it feels so good. You're up there, and you know you're coming down, and it's less than a second in reality, but it feels like a second or maybe a second and a half in your existence, in your consciousness. And it's like you almost trick gravity, or you trick time. There's something so just, when it's right, it's right. And again, that kind of plays into everything we've been speaking about.
Exactly. You said to strike a balance. And what I'm also, in history and in high jump as well, what I'm also intrigued is, I have a question about it. Do you know when you are up in the air, when you repeat all these steps, do you know that you are over the bar?
Yeah, 100%. So when I know I've got it right, So when I won my book silver medal back in May, and I'd never won a national medal before, and I'd just come back off the worst 2 years of my life, and I'd been working so hard, like so hard in this sport to get back to where I needed to be. The university, for the lad who was competing against me for the bronze medal, bronze and silver, we were having a bit of a jump off. They were just giving me just shit. And I just took off. I just ran the same run-up as normal, put that foot down. And there was just something in me that was just like, I just wanted to go, like, that's me. And I knew that A to B needed to be right. And then we normally say A to B is the run-up, B to C is kind of like over the bar and landing. I didn't care what happened in the air because A to B was right. And I just drove my knee, watched the bar go, closed the eyes, which you're not actually supposed to do, but I knew. And actually, it was one of those moments where there's so many times you dig a jump out, or you dig something out and you think, that was hard work. This was active. This was active transport. No. That moment was like gas escaping, or it was just effortless. It was like a bubble rising. I just had my eyes shut over the bar and I just lifted my legs. And it was like, I could have literally, it was the easiest feeling in the world, and it was the highest I'd ever jumped. And that was that moment of, there's a great video of me. I land on the bed and I look straight at the NTU lot, hands wide open. And then I just look at I look at the other university. I'll leave them out. I look at the other university and just think, yeah, you made me do that. You don't realize it, but it was just a spark inside me where you brought out that superpower that I talked about earlier. And yeah, it's one of those ones where even now I get excited about that feeling, because you can't always channel it, but when you do, it's ecstasy. It's pure magnificence. And sometimes you get that feeling in other aspects of life, but something like a sport, that's the adrenaline, you know, and you train all year round for 4, 5, 6 seconds of that feeling. You might get it twice a season, but it's that feeling of, I'm unbeatable right now. And the next height, which would have been a lifetime personal best, I was flying, and the only reason I didn't was because I started to try too hard. And it was that moment of like, on reflection, I could have done so much better that day. It was probably the best day of my career to the point, but I could have done so much better that day. And later on in the season, I was able to realize I was having another purple patch. That feeling was coming. I calmed down, and I did better. And that maybe is a teaching that you have to experience a couple of times to then realize when you're in those moments, you're in those moments. Because sometimes the static electricity that your body feels like it's channeling is so palpable that training goes out the window. Do you know what I mean? It's like,
yeah, of course.
It's almost like your flow state is just leaving you.
In his book, Tim Grover, Relentless, he's the PT, personal trainer, Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant.
Yep.
He talks about this, and he calls it in the zone. When the athlete is in the zone, then these things happen.
Yeah.
So in some kind of strange way, he connects it to like a dark side of us that Freud is talking about. And it's a very strange feeling, I would say.
And I've listened to this guy's podcast before. I can't remember who the actual host was.
Yeah, maybe it's Diary of CEO. He went to
potentially, yeah. And obviously, he says so many people can destroy themselves trying to find that dark place. And I think if you look at a lot of people who become truly world class, truly world class, something happened somewhere in their life, and they know how to come back from something. The people who it all goes well and swimmingly for a long time, and they're almost gifted a path, then don't sometimes seem to flourish to potentially what they could have been, because they never understood how painful it is to potentially lose that something that they're good at. You think about Kobe. He grew up in Italy. All the oppression and facts and figures about Italy's still quite harsh in its viewpoints. But back then, even then, in the 70s, probably being a black student was even tougher.
Yeah, his father was a player, and he played in the first Italian league by the time.
And you think about Michael Jordan. How obviously everyone's probably watched the documentary, and he just seems like the miracle kid that comes through. But he got dropped by his first couple of basketball coaches at high school because they thought he was small. They thought he was not it. And then he's arguably the GOAT of all sports, to some extent. I think there's probably individual moments where people have been better in their own sport, but just be consistently so good, night in, night out. And when I always say to people, basketballers play 82 games a season, it's probably 20 more than any footballer ever plays. And they do it in half the time, and they're never injured. And the ones who are injured for, like, okay, they've snapped their ACL. And that's because they're working so hard. And you think someone like Jordan, the amount of setbacks that he had to come through. He even played, that's why I always train when I'm ill. Flu game.
Yeah, this is what the Kobe and Jordan did. For Jordan is a famous sixth ring, I think.
Yeah.
The one that he played with the flu.
Yeah.
He was poisoned. Okay, I was just thinking to transition to the MA politics.
Yeah.
And your time there. So far, almost the first trimester is there, and we have some assignments. Can you share some of the feedback, opinion?
So straight away moving into something I've never done before, politics, something I'm very interested in. And I just kind of feel like it was the right thing for me to do. I find the course, it's interesting because I feel like with politics, and especially if you're being taught politics, there's certain bits of politics where it's very cut and dry. It's a science. And as we literally joked about, it's an MA. And that's because there's some aspects of politics that I've learned in these first couple of months that I didn't even really anticipate would have been in the course. And that's interesting because it's like, okay, I think you're at your best when you're learning, and sometimes it's good to be out of depth. Some of the things have been properly interesting, like some of the discussions I've had, especially with some of the lecturers, you can see that even the teaching of politics can be quite personal. It can be quite put across from their point of view. And I like that because...
And very often is.
Yeah. And I like that because I get to see their understanding of politics through their teaching. And some of the lecturers are fantastic in their understanding and their knowledge. And just it's that moment where, okay, I'm just going to be a sponge today. Just got to try and absorb absolutely everything that's going on in this room. That's what my first couple of months has felt like. Open mind. I have no expectations. I don't know what's going to go on. I don't know what's going to be talked about. I've just got to take it in. I'm doing mine over a split course, so over a two-year period. So I'm in slightly less than you are and other students, but I come to every lesson trying to give the same amount of effort and contribution or more contribution because I have less time one-to-one with teachers at the moment. Again, trying to be memorable or have that attention, but also because engagement is key, and it's almost like, why just come to lesson and just be dormant? Or if you've got a point and it's correct for the lesson, I always feel like everyone should speak. Do you know what I mean? Like I almost feel like more of that should be happening on our course. But what I am finding interesting is the level of detail that we are going into, and it's specific detail that I didn't even think we would be going into. So some of the political theory, I think one lecture was like 50 different authors were mentioned, and it's like, and our lecturer has read, written, or understood every single one of those, to bring that to us. And you know, when he, like, one of our lecturers, he's called Matthew Henn, quite a good political lecturer, obviously. And you search him on our library, and there's over 100 books or publications, and he's in every single one of them. And you think, okay, he's been a lecturer for 20, 30 years, but 100 books, like, or 100 articles. It's crazy to think that that's the level of knowledge that is around. Just even, I mean, I didn't under-anticipate, but I didn't think it would be tricky. And again, I'm using the word tricky, but I guess the move from history to politics has been slightly trickier than I anticipated. But I'm enjoying that because, again, it's making me work.
When you talk about politics, I see a lot of passion in your eyes.
Yeah.
Can you know, the Spotlight podcast is educational podcast, and basically the core of our audience is in Europe.
Yep.
Can you give us a little bit of insight what is going on we are in Nottingham, in relation to local politics, for those who don't know?
So Nottingham is interesting because in the UK we have city councils and we have county councils, and they're all under the same jurisdiction somewhat, and that's kind of like the party in control. And for the UK, for the last for the last decade or more, we've been Conservative, which is a central right party or a right party, and Nottingham City Council for the last 3 or 4 decades has been, for a considerable long time, has been a Labour Party, which is our centre-left or left, depending on versions of the same kind of party. But our county council is also Conservative, which is interesting and maybe tricky is another good word, because
tricky is the key word for this podcast.
Yeah, it does feel like that, especially when talking about the political side of things. So the city council right now are financially not doing well. Yeah. But that's seen across the board in the UK. I mean, Birmingham City Council.
A variety of reasons are involved.
Yeah, it's not just cut and dry that one is one party and one is the other. It really doesn't help. And there's probably reasons else why. I think maybe there's been some bad decisions. And I think there's been a lot of people who really do care about the city council. It's been tough. COVID, ramifications, another budget plan, certain things in the budget didn't go well, misallocation of funds potentially, not like in a legal way, but things were spent in the wrong areas, and deadlines and finance doesn't always quite key into place. But I think what we have right now is we have a county council works well with the government.
Obviously, because state and the county level are conservative.
Full collusion.
Yeah.
And then we have a city council which I think tries to be potentially unique in the sense of it tries its best. Like, it has done stuff where you can see that it's got a target of being, I think, carbon neutral by 2040 or 2050. And all of the buses got an upgrade, and they're all biogas powered. And there's things where you think, okay, this is feasible, it's going to work, and then it just hasn't quite. And as a local, I mean, I've been not city kind of council ran for the large majority of my life. I was Broxtowe, which is a kind of not constituency, but a council outside of the city. But looking in, Nottingham is seeing a resurgence in, I'd say, the kind of business and the kind of like the food and the industry, and the industries that seem to be coming back from COVID are kind of helping the overall appeal of Nottingham seem better than it was maybe 2 years ago. I mean, there was lots of shops closing down, and you'd walk down the street and the only shops that were open during COVID seemed to be charity shops, or it was one of those feelings of, okay, Nottingham's down it. Like, we really are seeing the closing of the high street. That's across the country that's happening, and across many countries that's happening. But I think that's what kind of really grinds me a little bit, that I've seen Nottingham do so well. Actually, this is a city that's, I mean, we've got Premier League football again. how can that not bring in more money than it is? We've got the build of a city that could flourish. It's small in the sense of the city centre is walkable. And there's so much history within the city, and there's so much rich kind of culture.
I would say rebellious.
Yeah.
History.
Yeah. But that culture has not been nurtured for me in the right way. And we tried things and they've not worked. So the big thing in Nottingham was the castle. And I think it was it 150 million or more than that? And I went when it was open, and I was a resident of Nottingham, and I paid, which I didn't think I actually would have had to have done.
Yeah, we will come to this topic.
And I went, and actually it was good. But stuff like that doesn't sell. Not 150 million. Oh. It needed the work doing. And I felt that I've been to Nottingham Castle. And in the past, it's been also good. But it was just a museum kind of thing. They spent £150 million to make more museum. So it wasn't financially viable. They spent £150 million. I couldn't 100% see where the £150 million or whatever the actual fee was had gone. I could see that stuff had happened and it was better than it was. But I turned around to my girlfriend when we left and said, I don't think that was worth it financially. Like it was like something like maybe 12 quid, 17 quid each. I'm thinking, I'm a student and I've only gone because I have kind of nostalgia or a love for...
At least you were curious to see
and
what they have done.
The thing for me is advertising, none. Appearance, none. They could have done so many things there. Festivals, non-historical appetizing things, craft beer, what do they call it? Farmers markets, historical farmers markets. Invite the people who like to cosplay. Invite the people who want to be there. Get a society. Do something, And I just felt that the potential was lost, and I don't think that helped the budget at all. I think the redevelopment of the historic kind of shopping centre, which is Broadmarsh Shopping Centre in Nottingham, it's just kind of stagnated. It looks like it could be really good. It looks like we could have like a second city kind of plaza centre. But that's been happening since 2016-17 in my memory, and it's 2023 now, and I've gone from being someone who was like 14-15 thinking, okay, Nottingham seems to be getting a lot of regeneration too. Will we ever finish this regeneration? And now that I'm going to be a taxpayer, council taxpayer, I'm now interested in why things don't happen.
Exactly.
And it went from me being kind of curious to almost physically not angry at the situation, but peeved. And that word really means there's a bee in my bonnet and I can feel it building, and I'm sure there's lots of people like that. But what I think needs to happen, especially for Nottingham City Council, is there needs to be a level of honesty first. Something's gone wrong. But if they're honest and they speak to the county council and there can be more collusion between the two, I think the amount of money that is in Nottingham and that can be generated from Nottingham, I think they can do it. But I think there needs to be maybe a stop put in place first, and something needs to just maybe be reshaped, or some ideas, or maybe even some youth. I mean, we spoke on a personal level about how there's certain ideas that they probably don't even have that could just be so helpful, like presence on social platforms or ideas.
I told you the other day I was listening this presentation of the deputy from the ONS, the National Statistic Bureau, National Office of Statistics, and brilliant presentation. But when I asked him, do you have a TikTok account or do you have an Instagram account? He said, I'm not sure. I told him, yes, I know because I've checked. You don't have a TikTok account. and they were complaining how youth, don't want to integrate and fill up the surveys and everything, but they don't meet them halfway. They're not present on their platforms.
And you see that throughout so many institutions. We were speaking to our lecturer just very quickly. He said, it costs thousands, hundreds of thousands of pounds to get these surveys done well. And their sample size was 1,680 people of surveys that they took forward. And of that, 590 or something was used, like in the actual investigation. Politely, I could get 593 people
our
done
collab
quickly.
of our reels will get 10K easily.
Yeah. And would all of them do a survey? No.
No, but with a certain type of impetus, why not?
Exactly. And that was like, and he said hundreds of thousands of pounds. I'm thinking hundreds of thousands of pounds.
Yeah.
And I know they went through a very specific company that did it well.
Yeah.
And they would probably get better quality data than if we tried to get 600 people to fill out a survey. But we'd still have 600 opinions. And you know what I mean? It was one of those ones where, like, even that made my eyes open. He's a university lecturer who is leading a political debate or even questionnaire about youth politics. And I bet if you ask the same question you asked to the ONS, he probably has a Facebook, probably has an Instagram, maybe. Definitely doesn't have a TikTok.
Exactly. I mean, ONS, Instagram 4K, YouTube less than 2K, and all of the animations were placed or uploaded on YouTube, but they have only 2K. For example, a small Spotlight podcast has already 12K coming from Montenegro, that is 670,000 inhabitant country, and this is 67 million.
Yeah, exactly.
10 times more.
Yeah.
So they need to put a little effort. Tell me, we've talked about the NTU in a very favorable manner. Does anything bother?
I think
bother you?
Yeah. I think there's certain things where I do feel maybe looking at other universities, there's some assets maybe that students don't seem to be afforded maybe. And I think maybe if we look at like the amount of students that Nottingham Trent University have, I saw this recently, with maybe the third or fourth highest university outside of the Open University and a couple in London for student population. And 1/4 coming from the outside.
Yeah,
I believe so. I think it's 41,000 students, 41,700 students. And 25% of those students are like say, external, at least. I mean, a lot of those are probably domestic students who are living in Nottingham, who are living externally, in the sense of like, the population of Nottingham Trent University, who actually are from Nottingham, is probably very, very thin. I am one of them, probably very, very thin. And I think that potentially the first thing that Nottingham Trent University could look at is just more buses in general. That's probably the first thing, because...
What do we have now at the moment? There is a bus line 4.
Yeah, I think it's an individual bus. It's like a 4i or a 4x. It's not just a 4. So the number 4 goes to Clifton, but not the campus. The number 4x goes to Clifton, and then the campus last stop.
Oh, okay.
So it's like an additional add-on.
How many in shift in total? No idea.
I mean, probably 12. I think that's probably a good estimate if you think about...
And the biggest issue here is, as far as I can anticipate, is the fact that students pay for a round trip around 3.2. I think 1.6 is discounted price one way. And we are talking about students that regular basis go to Clifton campus, majority of them international, based in city campus, and already paid 16.5K up to 20K per year, per annum. And really, we see no reason why they should be paying additional 30 a month.
So
from one campus to the other campus of the same university.
Yeah, a breakdown for me is when I realized in third year I'd need to travel to university 3 to 4 times, or even now I travel to Clifton.
But you are a student athlete.
Yeah, a scholar. So I'm paid in such by the university to compete, and I have to travel to the high performance gym that we have in Clifton, which is lovely, and it's had a massive new renovation.
Hey, I heard the total cost for the whole campus to be as it is today is around 400 million. Some crazy number came up. Like the campus is beautiful.
Clifton is top notch, and you can see why NTU is doing so well in all the polls.
But I'll tell you, I went on weekends. It's a ghost town.
Yeah, and 2 or 3 things I can add to that. I travel to Clifton twice a week, but I'm not based at Clifton for education. But if I was, I'd be going 5 or 6 times a week. It then made it cheaper for me to actually buy a kind of a bus card for the year. It's not very well advertised. It's also not very well offered to international students, especially students who potentially might not know Nottingham well. But a £500 upfront bus card, which is still a lot of money, especially for international students just to fork out straight away, ended up being cheaper for me for a year as a student than just paying as you go. And when there are other universities across even the East Midlands, to make it local, that have regular bus services where their students just either pay through their tuition, and it's like not additional because it's already kind of inbuilt, and then therefore the bus service seems free, or you see buses from other universities and you think, what are they doing that's different? Like the actual bus has got the logo on it. Like our bus, if you didn't know, you'd just miss it. It says Trent University campus on the front of the bus that flashes up on, but it's just like every other bus. And there's somewhat where I think when I go to Nottingham Trent University, it's been UK University of the Year through different metrics and different newspapers for like last 4 or 5 years. And it is catching up and doing so well for itself. But that might be the area where it lets itself down. And it's not maybe something that they think is a priority, but maybe if you were to have a conversation with university students who are domestic and international, the domestic might go, yeah, well, you pay for a bus everywhere. The international might go, I'm already paying so much, why am I paying for a bus?
Exactly. And it's the same university. This is what I'm keep on beating this to the ground.
Yeah.
It's the two campuses of the same university.
And you'd have to pay for the bus or the tram. And the tram doesn't even really arrive at the university. It arrives a mile away and you walk. And that's actually kind of actively, it's not talked about by the uni because it's obviously not even subsidized, or it's not even owned by anything to do with the university. But the university will say sometimes like, oh, it's good to go get the tram, because they know that it's another way students can get to the campus. But yeah, for me, it took me a while to realize as someone who's obviously lived in Nottingham for a while, that things like that, I guess because I'm predisposed to paying for buses anyway. But then when other people from other universities go like, oh, so what, you don't have an actual specific university bus, or like international students who I met in first year of my university, whose attendance was like 60 or 50%. And they were like, I just don't really understand the buses. Because I don't, like some countries don't use a system like that. For example, like in Asia, some Asian countries just don't have buses that work like that. Or they don't want to travel. They've said, okay, I'm coming to Nottingham Trent University, and they see it outside the window when they live in city. And then they think, why am I travelling 40 minutes down the road on a bus? So maybe that's a little bit of confusion that comes with some of the students. But that level of understanding for me, it took me a while to kind of get to grips with, actually, yeah, like we pay, even as like a domestic student, we pay £9,000 a year base, or if you're a master's student, it'd be £12,000 for the year as a domestic student.
What do you feel it could be let's say a best case scenario solution for this issue?
So if you take some feasibility out the window, then obviously a fleet of Nottingham Trent University buses, that's semi-feasible. I don't know the financial kind of breakdown yet, but there's an idea where we physically could have like a Uni of Nottingham or Uni of Derby kind of bus service, and that could be piggybacked off something like Nottingham City Transport, which it kind of is right now. But it feels like the Nottingham Trent University bus is actually just piggybacking off the Clifton service. And it needs to be the other way around, in the sense of it's out and out our bus. Not only university students can get on it, because I guess actually the stops along the way would be helpful for other members of the public, and that's where it probably could be feasible for Nottingham Trent University and Nottingham City Council to work together like they are. Maybe there's a bus card that's like very cheap for students to get. You still make money off it. But how many more students would travel a lot more in the city, just considerably, if, let's say, this student card was half the price of an annual card that you'd pay if you're like a non-student, and but it was like through Nottingham Trent University. But then the Nottingham Trent University was to give back to NCTX somehow. I just think there's it really did kind of dawn on me that, okay, if other universities can do it, Nottingham Trent University is a big university now.
Exactly.
It's you know, when you see the developments that happen on campus, we've got a new art block being built. It's going to be nearly 90 to 100 meters tall. It's a skyscraper. It's beautiful. Some students who are going to be living on Clifton will be paying, like I say, £3.60 a day. Or £3.20 a day, £3.20 a day, something like that.
Yeah, whatever. I mean,
well, yeah, pending price pending because of inflation right now. But £3.20 a day. Well, so let's say you're going in 5 times a week, potentially 15, 18 quid, depending on if, because sometimes you might not want to buy like an all day ticket, and then 18 quid a week. What you're looking at? So let's say, make the math easy, 60 quid a month nearly.
Or they can purchase a month card, which is already, I don't know, 30, 35.
But still.
Yeah.
Still.
Yeah. Okay, I think we've kind of sent our message there. Could you, for the very end, tell me a little bit about your plans for the future? Our outro is around 2 minutes. So just for you to let you know, give us a little bit about your plans for the future.
Yeah, so about as briefly as I can get it, I'm going to plan to do as well as I can in athletics, and I'd love to go to the Olympics. It's a stretch, and it's always a stretch target for everybody. But I think the biggest thing for me is I want to move forward with politics into a job. I don't know where, I don't know when, I don't know how, but to build the athletics, to build the politics, to put myself in a position where there is no regret, and let's say athletics takes off, I'm going to be more than happy. But then I have a feasible background where I've done the education, I've got a path to a job that I want to do, something that I can achieve. And for me, I feel like getting the education, it builds a level of credibility for the next steps that I want to take. And especially if I think about athletics, it's a 10-year career. But what do I do after that?
Exactly.
So for me, I think continue down the line, build connections with Nottingham Trent University, because I think it's a good organisation. Learn some skills from being like on the athletics committee and stuff like that, and really just look for potentially some obviously high earning would be great, but some job where I feel like I'm giving back in the sense of like, this is what I've learned, this is how educated I am, and I'm trying to give myself maybe, I don't know, 10, 15 years of a really solid career, and then hopefully put your feet up after that. That would be the ideal goal, you know, 40, 45 and self-made hopefully, and then enjoy more less substantial things potentially. That would be an amazing goal. But yeah, I guess keep working hard and wake up every day with the positive attitude that I have. That's probably today's goal. Do you know what I mean? Keep pushing.
Harry, best of luck, first of all, in all your endeavors, and thank you so much for stopping by and talking with us.
Cheers. It's been a pleasure. Cheers.